Hi everyone, this will be a direct video response to Scotty M's video, which is called Supply and Demand. The thing is, actually I didn't really want to do a response because his claims are so fucking, sorry, but really freaking ridiculous.
This is laughable. How on earth can you argue with the laws of supply and demand? This is a bit like someone saying the laws of physics is ridiculous, that the laws of gravity can be argued with. I'm sorry, if you walk off a cliff you're going down the way. You can't argue with that. Just like you can't argue with the laws of supply and demand. The basic laws of supply and demand tell us that when prices goes up, demand goes down. When prices goes down, demand goes up.
His very first claim is that Mason or Steiner, whatever, Red Scare TV, thinks that, quote, as Scotty M says, all people are born into this world with some God-given rights to possession. Then he goes on and says nobody is going to do this for free, which is actually totally twisting around Mason's argument, my argument too, and also the argument of pretty much every communist. The thing is, with this argument, he implies that in a communist society, everything is given to you for free. Guess what, Scotty M? Nope.
This is why you can't take your type seriously, because of the whole idea of communism itself is predicated on the idea of being moneyless. Therefore, there is no profit motive. The other part of the problem is the economic calculation problem. We'll touch upon that. But first of all, the profit motive. The fact today surrounding us, we have the vast population demanding higher paid wages, including socialists themselves, demanding higher paid wages through the minimum wage, contradicts your fallacious idea of this moneyless economy. Who wants to work when there's no money to give them that incentive to work? Are you insinuating that for the work they do, that they are rewarded with gifts? The problem with this silly idea relates to the second problem, which is the economic calculation problem. The economic calculation problem relates to prices, and what do prices tell the market? What purpose do prices serve? Prices are not an obstacle to getting what you want. Rather, what prices are signals in the market to tell you valuable information of profits and losses. Without the information that prices give to you, you cannot allocate scarce resources to the market. This tells me you don't understand the basics of economics. Why? The reason the study of economics exists is a study of our place on this earth, how we can better improve our living standards whilst using the fewest resources as possible. But there's a bigger problem, and that problem is scarcity. Resources are not infinite, they are finite. In other words, there is not enough resources to go around everyone. So the purpose of why the study of economics exists is to find the most efficient way possible as to how we can translate those natural resources into commodities and allocate to the market efficiently without causing waste. Meaning that we must economise, which simply means finding the most efficient economic system possible to better improve living standards using the fewest resources as possible. This alone tells us you don't understand the purpose the study of economics serves us. So going back to prices, prices are signals to the market that allow us to allocate those scarce resources to the market efficiently. If you do not hold the information of the price mechanism, you can't allocate scarce resources efficiently. There's no possible way you can. This is why people who support mixed economies and socialism are literally clueless when it comes to economics, because they don't understand that what price controls cause is a distortion of the price mechanism. Price controls destroy the valuable information of profits and losses. What does that mean? Well, what do profits and losses tell the market? Profits tells the market what to produce more of, where to allocate scarce resources, what to invest more in. Losses tell the market what to stop producing more of, where to stop allocating scarce resources, and what to stop investing in. In other words, the information that profits and losses tell us is valuable information to allocate those scarce resources to the market efficiently, because if you don't have this available information, what you end up doing is misallocating resources. The misallocation of resources is all too common thanks to nationalisation of industry, because government price controls through price ceilings and price floors destroys the available information of profits and losses. And what ends up happening is the government ends up putting scarce resources into parts of the economy that were simply not required and neglecting where it is required. Also, government has no possible way of knowing the information of every single living human being's needs and wants. It doesn't know this information, nor does it know how much to produce of every single product out there on the market. Add to this problem, consumers' needs and wants change and vary, they fluctuate. Just because I want a bike now doesn't mean I'll want it 6 months from now. Government has no way of possibly knowing this information. Thus, this is the very reason why the NHS itself is inefficient and why thousands of cancer patients are neglected. Not only is government clueless with the costs, it is clueless where to allocate the scarce resources. Therefore, with a moneyless economy, how do you propose allocating scarce resources to every living being when you have no information of where to allocate scarce resources, what to produce more of, and what to stop producing more of? You don't hold this information. That's the whole point of prices. They tell the market whether something is valuable or not. They also tell the market what is scarce and what is not. Destroy that information and you're destined for death.
From a person who obviously doesn't understand communism or Marx at all. Also doesn't understand the communist or socialist economic systems. The original quote and the original claim by Marx is the following. Quote, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his need." Quote end. Which literally means each according to his abilities or skills and or his workforce or his labor, to each individual's needs. I really have no freaking idea how you can interpret in these words that communism is about giving everything to everyone for free, which is it obviously isn't. And this quote doesn't say so either. Sorry, but this is big bullshit.
Well, we've already covered this problem. The meaning of from each according to his ability to each according to his needs means that there will be enough produced to go around everyone, and the reason this is deeply flawed is because the first problem is that each and every single individual are all different from one another. We all have different needs and wants. We don't all want the same thing. So in other words, how do you know what to produce for each and every single individual, say for 70 million people in Great Britain? You don't have that available information. The second problem has already been debunked. You don't have the available information of prices to allocate scarce resources, and what purpose does the study of economics serve? Economics is a study to find the most efficient way possible, whilst using the fewest resources as possible to better improve our living standards with scarce resources. In other words, economics exists because there is not enough resources to go around everyone. So the purpose of economics is to find an efficient system to provide scarce resources to match people's needs and wants, whilst using the fewest resources as possible. If you do not hold the information of prices, how do you plan to achieve that? Again, proving you don't even understand what purpose economics serves, why it exists.
And this is a typical argument of anti-communists and a typical anti-communist propaganda. And obviously, those people have never read Marx, nor do they understand Marx's systems or the systems of communism or socialism, which developed after Marx. The thing is, Marx was not the only one to develop such systems. Actually, many of those systems go back to, at least two of those systems go back to Hegel, for example. Then comes Marx, then later come other Marxists from all over Europe and other socialists. But yeah, none of them and none of their ideas or ideology was giving everything to everyone for free.
So what we can confirm is that you're stating money does exist under a communistic system then. Tell me something, how do you propose to have money when capitalism produces 100% of all your money? After all, what do you think money is? It's part of the capital. Without capital produced by capitalism, you have no money. What you think funds the public sector? The government pays the wages of the public sector, right? So where does the government get the money from to pay their wages? If it doesn't get it from the printing press, the only place the government can get the money from is directly from the private sector. In other words, no private sector, no money. Unless, of course, you want to fund an entire economy on the printing press, which will drive you into hyperinflation.
Also, what I find very ironically is that he says that people like us, or i.e. socialists, think we are born into the world with some God-given right. Well, guess what? It's the actual opposite. This is exactly what capitalists think and what capitalism thinks.
I have never heard such utter nonsense in my entire life. The whole idea of capitalism is predicated on the idea that you have to work for what you want. You don't just get it handed to you on a plate. If you want something, you have to work for it. This applies to any business owner. If they do not provide for their customers, their business is not going to be successful. Now, we understand how religious you are of socialism, and you cannot bear to stand the fact that capitalism is an individualist ideology where you cannot take capitalism outside of individualism, but this is a simple fact. Corporatism, which is the opposite of capitalism, is a collectivist ideology. The word collectivism, even by definition, is synonymous to the word socialism. This evidence I have backed up in the past and will do so if you respond again. In other words, under a capitalist system, you must work to provide for your customers if you want to be a successful business. You don't just get things handed to you. That's not how a capitalist system works. What we have today is not a capitalist system, it's a socialist, collectivist, corporatist system where the government steps in to bail out losses of big corporations at the expense of taxpayers. Notice how the government taxes money out of people's hands collectively. That's because it's a collectivist system. Another word for collectivism is socialism. Corporatism is merely just a branch of socialism. The redistribution of wealth via state coercion, again, is socialism. State coercion is a defining ethic of socialism. All means of state direction of the economy is socialism. The reason you don't like this fact is because you don't like the dictionary definitions and recorded history that contradicts you. Capitalism is not pro-business, it is pro-consumer. If you're not going to provide any of your customers under a capitalist system, good luck trying to survive as a business because you don't have a government there to bail you out. There's no such thing as bailouts under a capitalist system. Perhaps if you gained an education and understanding what economics is and capitalism, you would understand this, but you don't.
Actually, socialism is the opposite. It's about making people equal.
Oh, and please, this is the laugh of the century. Socialism is all about making people equal. Was this the same equality where we saw a 1% elite sitting up top in the Soviet Union with the masses living in poverty? Oh, that's right. Here is where you blame the Union Soviet Socialist Republic on capitalism. As if that weren't bad enough, we then have North Korea with a 1% elite and the masses living in extreme poverty. no different to that of Venezuela, Cuba, and the list goes on. The biggest laugh of all is, however, all we heard about was the Labour Party in Great Britain boasting off about democratic socialism between 1945 to 1979, about their socialist policies and how they closed the wealth gap. Tell me something, how can you close a wealth gap by debauching your currency? If you don't understand what that means, allow me to explain that for you. It is every £1 to the value of the product. And for every £1 that you print, there is a 1 plus debt added to the currency. The more paper you print in circulation, the lower the valuation of your currency. This means the lower the valuation of your currency, the poorer your people become, because there's less purchasing power of the currency. This is why prices inflate and go through the roof, because the less purchasing power your money holds, the less you can buy with it. Now, what is most important about this? The poor only have the paper they get in hand for the work they do in exchange. The rich people, on the other hand, own all the assets. Do you not understand what that means? It means that the devaluation of the currency hurts the poor but does not hurt the rich, because the rich people are not reliant upon a paper currency, they own all the assets. Thus the gap between the rich and poor widens. This is all thanks to your Labour Party socialism. Throughout recorded history, everywhere socialism has existed, that's right, the real world, we have seen the massive gap between the rich and poor. Socialism destroys the middle class, and with no middle class, there is no possible way the poor can move up the ladder for better wealth, because the only ism with a middle class is capitalism. Destroy capitalism, the gap between the rich and poor is inevitable. Hong Kong, as proven by the Gini coefficient, closed the wealth gap between the rich and poor between 1961 to 1997. It achieved that with no natural resources and no national minimum wage. It just tells you something.
And not giving them any God-given rights or God-given rights of possession. It's about equally distributing this wealth.
This utopia sounds nice and everything. Remind me again, how are you going to allocate scarce resources efficiently without the information of profits and losses again? That's right, your idea of socialism has been completely destroyed with the argument on prices, because the resources being scarce means there's not enough resources to fulfill everyone's needs. How then do you plan to create the egalitarian utopia of redistribution of wealth so everyone gets equally? Let me read out something to you by Thomas Sowell, an example that debunks your silly nonsense. Unquote. Misconceptions of the role of prices are common. Many people see prices as simply obstacles to their getting the things they want. Those who would like to live in a beachfront home, for example, may abandon such plans when they discover how extremely expensive beachfront property can be. But high prices are not the reason we cannot all live on the beachfront. On the contrary, the inherent reality is that there are not enough beachfront homes to go around, and prices simply convey that underlying reality. When many people bid for a relatively few homes, those homes become very expensive because of supply and demand. But it is not the prices that cause the scarcity, which would exist under whatever other kind of economic system or social arrangements might be used instead of prices. There would be the same scarcity under feudalism or socialism or in a tribal society. If the government today were to come up with a plan for universal access to beachfront homes and put caps on the prices that could be charged for such property, that would not change the underlying reality of the extremely high ratio of people to beachfront land. With a given population and a given amount of beachfront property, rationing without prices would have to take place by bureaucratic, fiat, political favouritism or random chance. But the rationing would still have to take place. Even if the government were to decree that beachfront homes were a basic right of all members of society, that would still not change the underlying scarcity in the slightest. Off quote. As we can see from the example Thomas Sowell gave, this is no different to your deluded idea that you can somehow produce enough to go around everyone and fulfill everyone's needs. There aren't enough resources. Even then you don't have the available information of how much to produce of each and every product out there on the market. You don't know what needs to be produced, as it is impossible for you to know every product out there on the market, and you don't know how much to produce of each. Even then you don't know the value of each. Value is not objective. Value is subjective. A music album I personally like may be of great value to me, but will not be of any value to the person standing next to me who likes rock music.
It's about equally distributing this wealth to everyone, which is the exact opposite of God-given rights, which you have in monarchism, capitalism and fascism, where people are born into a certain social status, and with that have certain rights or means over other humans or other people.
This is why people such as yourself are ignorant. With someone such as yourself who doesn't understand the definition of economics, you don't understand what laissez-faire capitalism is. This proves you have no clue what a free market is by claiming that a free market economy is about some set group of rich people born into wealth somehow control the rest of society, and the reason this is complete and utter silly nonsense is because the history of America contradicts you, as does the history of Singapore and British history. The history of America is the perfect example because throughout recorded history, not once have we ever seen monopolies form under a free market economy. Every instance of recorded history, whether that be British history, American history, or elsewhere, the only time we have seen monopolies form was due to government intervention. United States history is the perfect example, as I say, with the examples of Standard Oil as I gave in the past. The Standard Oil Company did not hold a monopoly even when they gained 90% share of the market. They were forced to continue on driving down their costs because of the threat of competition stepping in and underbidding them. Your fallacious made-up fairy tale claim, which is what it is nothing other than fictitious. Please, show me an example where in a free market system the rich were born into wealth and then controlled the whole of society. If the Standard Oil Company controlled the rest of society, how come John Davison Rockefeller was pressured into reducing his costs? The monopoly definition is characterised by a company that completely owns the market in the field area they work in. If anything, John Davison Rockefeller was forced by market competition and consumer choice to provide for his consumers, because if he did not, he would have been wiped out by other market competition. Perhaps the best example you could throw at me is the De Beers Group. How did they get close to that near-perfect monopoly? Because of state intervention, as a result of the nationalisation. So if anyone likes to spread communist propaganda based on fictitious lies, it's people such as yourself. Plus the fact, what business is it to you what someone else has? Who cares if someone else is richer than you, or even if they were born into wealth? That does not mean to say, however, that rich people control society under a free market system. On the contrary, they benefit the masses in society, not just because they can offer thousands of jobs and own the capital for mass production. This can lead to better standard of living for society. How else you think the average household today has a toilet in them? These things were once only affordable to the rich. Then again, you don't understand the basic laws of supply and demand, not even in economics for dummies language.
Sorry, this is not socialism, this is the opposite of socialism. But this is obviously what Scotty M doesn't understand. Obviously, he seems to think that capitalism is socialism and socialism is vice versa capitalism. Sorry, but how Scotty M is able to think that, or why he thinks that, is really beyond my comprehension.
How on earth do you draw to that conclusion that I think capitalism is socialism and that socialism is capitalism? What makes people such as yourself so ignorant, if not stupid, is the fact that recorded history itself contradicts you. Again, we can see this from British history and American history alone, never let alone the history of Singapore or Hong Kong. If people pay close attention to the argument you have made thus far to define communism, you define communism purely based off theory. In other words, everything to you is Marx said this and Marx said that. The amazing thing is there are people out there who can't grasp why this is deeply flawed. It's common sense. Just because you say something doesn't mean to say that it will turn out the same in practice. Again, you fail to understand the importance of theory in practice. People can have good intentions, such as many socialists have when it comes to the theory of socialism. But just because you have good intentions doesn't mean to say that the consequences of your intentions will be good. In fact, those good intentions turn into bad consequences. For example, you raise minimum wage and as a result of this, the unemployment levels rise as well as the cost of produce. This is a prime example of what we mean by having good intentions doesn't necessarily mean to say there will be good consequences. What differentiates a good economist from a bad economist? The good economist looks at not just short-term consequences but also long-term consequences of given policies. In other words, you don't place good intentions above consequences, meaning that you must analyse how given policies affect people in the real world when put into practice. This is something that seems almost oblivious to you. It seems to go over your head, where in your mind consequences don't matter. All that matters are your good intentions. The end. Furthermore, it is the truth that you socialists do think you are born into this world with some God-given right. For example, you think healthcare is a right or education is a right. Therefore, you believe these things should be handed to you on a plate, where you believe that those who work in the education and healthcare sectors of the economy somehow have a duty to serve you. So yes, you do believe you have some God-given right. That's why you argue against paying for healthcare or education.
How he can even think that socialism is giving you any God-given rights over other people is really beyond my comprehension.
So what you're telling me is, it goes over your head that socialists such as yourself think you have a right to universal healthcare, which basically means that you think you have a right to other people's money. It's the truth. People such as yourself think your rights are all that matter, yet you completely ignore the fact that you take away individual rights. Let's say we use the example of employment. Let's say someone claims they have a right to work. Sure, you have individual rights to work in your own business by free choice. But what about the right to work elsewhere? Well, first of all, this means you have a right to work whenever you feel like it, but what you're ignoring is you're taking away the employer's rights to say, no, I don't want you working for my company. That's precisely what I mean when you socialists think you have a God-given right over individual rights. That's honestly how you people think. You think you have a God-given right to education and healthcare, which is taking away the rights of those other individuals who disagree. What if I, as an individual, peacefully disagree that healthcare is not a right but is a very important privilege? Are you going to abuse me by calling me all the names in the book? What you ignore is that I as an individual have a right to say, no, I don't want to fund into a universal healthcare system. Without you realising it, you're taking away the rights of other individuals from disagreeing with it. And how do you fund your collectivist system? Through government coercion, in other words, theft. So what you're saying is, your right is more important than my right to disagree. That's more or less what you're saying.
And it shows that Scotty M, sorry, but obviously understands nothing about socialism, and even more, he doesn't understand anything about capitalism either, or any other political or economic system. He obviously has no freaking idea what he's talking about. He's just blindly repeating anti-communist propaganda.
I don't think this needs much of a response. Anyone who has listened to the other 3 parts so far can see that I do understand the strong fundamentals of basic economics. I have more or less destroyed your entire argument on socialism on pricing alone. I understand perfectly fine well what socialism is. The difference is I don't define socialism by theoretical fairy tale bedtime stories. I define socialism by what it has proven to be in practice, time and time again throughout recorded history. We have the evidence plastered all over history to see why communism failed. I've already made a complete fool out of your argument about the rich. Your credibility has been destroyed because you can't point out to me examples of monopolies that formed under a free market economy. If anyone is clueless when it comes to laissez-faire capitalism, that will be yourself. But that's right, Marx said this and Marx said that. So if Marx said that if you walk off a cliff, you'll float, that must mean it's true then. Your inability to understand something so simple as theory and practice is proof that you have severe lack of intelligence.